This is a classroom in Ghana, this one's in Vietnam, and this one in Palestine. Different countries, different flags, but the history books printed in the same city. You call it education, but to the people funding it, it's foreign policy in disguise. They say wars are fought with weapons, but some are won with whiteboards. No tanks, no troops, just a syllabus. Funded abroad, approved in silence, and taught as truth. Because if you shape what a generation believes, you never need to invade. They'll grow up defending your version of the world, as if it were their own. Today, the average student in Africa studies a colonial map, older than their grandparents. In Southeast Asia, millions learn about democracy from textbooks paid for by governments that still drop bombs nearby. In dozens of countries, what students are taught about identity, freedom, and history isn't just biased, it's purchased. Curriculums are no longer about what's right, they're about what's convenient and funded. This isn't about teaching math or reading, it's about writing memory before anyone else does. And once the version is printed, distributed, and tested, changing it takes a generation. So let me ask you something. If the story of your country was written by someone else, would you even know? This is the untold business of global education, where every lesson is a weapon and every classroom a quiet conquest. Welcome to Empire Secrets. War doesn't end when the guns stop. It ends when the victors write the curriculum. After World War II, Japan surrendered militarily, but it was in the classroom that real submission began. A new constitution, a new anthem, and inside every textbook, a new narrative, written not by Japan, but by American consultants, flown in with typewriters and clearance badges. Between 1945 and 1952, US occupation forces reviewed or rewrote every schoolbook used in Japan, line by line. It's like changing the wallpaper after a fire, while quietly redrawing the floor plan. Democracy wasn't taught organically, it was embedded, like a prescription. Imagine losing a war and waking up to find your children learning the enemy's lullabies. But what replaced it wasn't neutral. It was Western approved. Over 100 million textbooks were destroyed or revised by Allied forces after 1945, in what scholars now called denazification through education. Officially, it was about removing hate. Unofficially, it was about installing alignment. You see, bombs flatten buildings, but curriculum reshapes belief. And the cost of losing a war is rarely just land. It's the right to tell your own story. Today, the same pattern continues, just quieter. Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, Ukraine. Each invaded, each rebuilt, each handed a new framework for schooling. Not just by local ministries, but by foreign donors, NGOs, and advisory consultants. They don't carry weapons, they carry lesson plans. Post-conflict education reform is a billion-dollar industry, and in most cases, it's funded externally. But the price isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in ideological real estate. And once it's installed, it doesn't leave. They call it rebuilding minds, but when the blueprint isn't yours, what exactly are you rebuilding? In theory, NGOs help rebuild education. In practice, they often outsource ideology. You'll find them everywhere: post-conflict zones, refugee camps, developing nations. Armed not with weapons, but workshops, pilot programs, donor-backed values education, and behind every lesson plan, a funding source. Because nothing says independent thinking like a syllabus sponsored by 6 logos. In 2023, over 60% of all curriculum development projects in low-income countries were funded or influenced by external NGOs. These aren't always sinister actors. Some are genuinely committed to access and equity, but the power lies in the template. A local Ministry of Education might approve it, but the content, it was written in Geneva, or Washington, or Brussels. What counts as history? What gets translated? What gets emphasized or erased? In Rwanda, post-genocide curricula were reshaped by external advisors to focus on unity, but some argue it left out key political context. What begins as reform often becomes erasure. It's like decluttering a bookshelf, starting with the books that challenge your worldview. And because the materials are labeled as inclusive, they're rarely challenged. After all, who wants to criticize peace? But under the banner of neutrality, entire generations are taught to see the world through foreign eyes. A civil war becomes a tribal dispute. Colonialism becomes early European contact. Freedom becomes a license agreement approved by donors. It's subtle, it's standardized, and it sticks. Think of it like a sticker on a child's globe. Easy to place, hard to peel off later. Because if your country doesn't fund its own syllabus, someone else will. And they won't just print textbooks, they'll print perspective. You won't see the strings, but by the time you speak, the accent won't be yours. While the West was exporting democracy through textbooks, China built schools. Not in Beijing, not even in Asia. In Kenya, in Serbia, in Ecuador. As of 2024, China has funded or built over 1,000 education projects in more than 60 countries, often as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. And alongside the cement, they export something else: curriculum frameworks. You've heard of Confucius Institutes, language and culture programs set up on foreign campuses. But they don't just teach Mandarin, they teach China's version of diplomacy, development, and history. It's less about fluency and more about alignment, with subtitles in soft power. By 2023, more than 500 Confucius Institutes were operating in universities across the globe, often directly linked to Chinese state policy objectives. Some were shut down, some quietly renamed, but the strategy continued, just decentralized. Chinese-backed education programs now operate through scholarships, online platforms, university partnerships, and joint curriculum initiatives. They don't need to rewrite history, they just need to reframe it. Taiwan is undeniably Chinese territory. Tibet is an internal matter. The Belt and Road isn't strategy, it's mutual prosperity. And when students in Nairobi or Belgrade or Dhaka repeat these lines, it doesn't sound like propaganda, it sounds like the textbook. Because that's the brilliance of it. The softest form of power is the kind taught at exam time. And while the West debates free speech on campus, China prints certainty. No debates, just answers. Packaged, translated, and shipped globally. Not for control, for familiarity. And once it feels normal, you'll stop asking where it came from. Because if the next generation grows up thinking China is a partner, not a threat, you don't need to fight over influence. You already have it. And if the world starts quoting your version of the truth, does it even matter if it's true? The empire may be gone, but its textbooks remain. Across Africa, the Caribbean, South Asia, millions of students still learn history written by their former colonizers. Not in the footnotes, in the core curriculum. In more than 25 post-colonial countries, key school subjects like history, literature, and civics still rely on structures inherited from colonial education systems. British colonies were taught that independence was granted, not fought for, that exploration was discovery, that civilization arrived on ships, as if entire continents were just waiting for someone to show them how to hold a spoon. And decades later, some of those lessons are still printed, taught, and graded. In 2022, a survey in West African schools found that over 40% of textbooks still use British written source material for teaching colonial history. It's not just what's included, it's what's missing. History, after all, is easier to teach when the uncomfortable parts are left on cutting room floors. Local resistance, cultural erasure, economic extraction. Entire chapters are either sanitized or omitted. Why? Because rewriting a curriculum takes time. Translation, funding, approval from ministries still trained in the language of their former rulers. And when money's tight, what gets replaced first? Usually not the books. So, even long after the last flag came down, students are still tested on their ability to repeat the conqueror's version. It's not conspiracy, it's inertia, professionally maintained. Colonialism may have ended legally, but culturally it's still part of the exam. And for the global elite, that's ideal. Why? Because students who grow up viewing colonialism as a historical necessity are far less likely to question the systems it left behind. And if the past still belongs to someone else, how free is your future really? Education used to be printed, now it's coded. From language apps to online classrooms, the classroom is no longer a place. It's a platform, and that platform has a business model. By 2025, over 65% of all students in low and middle income countries will use some form of digital learning platform, often funded by foreign tech giants. Sounds like progress, but these tools don't just teach, they track. Lesson completion, response times, error patterns, engagement. Every click becomes a data point, not for the student's benefit, but for the company's insight. It's not a report card, it's a spreadsheet, and your attention span is the asset. In 2023, a major edtech company was found collecting behavioral data from millions of students across Africa and Southeast Asia, with no local data protection laws in place. And while governments called it digital transformation, the real transformation is ownership. Most local ministries don't write the code, they license it, which means the algorithms deciding what a child learns aren't calibrated for context. They're optimized for efficiency, scale, and analytics. Because who needs context when you've got conversion rates? Curriculum becomes content, testing becomes tracking, and education becomes a data product, quietly monetized and exported. Even worse, in some regions, entire curriculums are now hosted by platforms headquartered in the US or China. If the platform changes, the lessons do too. In 2024, several African nations reported their national curriculum delivery was paused due to updates on third-party platforms they didn't control. This isn't just outsourcing infrastructure, it's outsourcing intellectual sovereignty. And while your kids swipe to the next quiz, their learning patterns are sold, studied, and fed back into machine learning pipelines used to refine products, not pedagogy. Because if your curriculum can be updated remotely, was it ever really yours? Every nation claims education is neutral, but neutrality is expensive, and someone's always willing to pay for influence. In 2023 alone, over $4.7 billion in foreign funding was injected into national education systems worldwide, often tied to policy recommendations. Sometimes it's subtle, a textbook donation from a foreign ally, a curriculum guide shared by a university abroad, a cultural exchange program with pre-approved lesson plans. Other times, it's more direct. A government can receive a grant to improve digital literacy, but the software is licensed, the tutorials are pre-written, and the content, it just happens to align with the donor's worldview. Coincidence, of course, just like every sponsored syllabus ever. In 2022, an education grant in Eastern Europe was revealed to include curriculum clauses promoting NATO-aligned history framing. This isn't new. During the Cold War, both the US and Soviet Union funded massive education campaigns abroad. Today, it's just cleaner, faster, algorithmically scalable. Ideology no longer needs to be imposed. It can be embedded. Climate change, framed as opportunity or threat depending on the sponsor. Gender rights, emphasized or omitted based on regional politics. Economic theory, taught as fact or as philosophy, depending on which institution funded the courseware. Even the term entrepreneurship education, now common in development programs, originated from Western donors seeking to shift economic mindsets in post-conflict zones. Because nothing says empowerment like being trained to start a business in a market you don't own. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to untangle what's education and what's public relations. Because once the curriculum arrives, it's rarely questioned. It's reviewed, approved, translated, then installed. And even if the ideology isn't believed, it's repeated. For grades, for scholarships, for survival. That's the brilliance of it. When the donor funds the test, everyone learns to pass. It's not indoctrination, it's just multiple choice, with only one right answer. Empires used to take land, now they take memory. It's cleaner, quieter, and the PR team loves it. Borders shift, flags change, but what stays is what people believe. And belief in modern geopolitics is far more valuable than territory. By 2030, the global education sector is projected to exceed $10 trillion, making it the single largest influence pipeline in the world. Not because students are learning faster, but because every country is now in the business of narrative control. Some do it with soft power, some with donations, some through platforms, and others just with silence. Apparently, empire building now comes with a login page, but the outcome is the same. What a child learns about freedom, about security, about who started the war, is no longer determined by facts, it's determined by access to books, to software, to language, to the gatekeepers of what counts as education. And when those gatekeepers are external, you're not teaching, you're repeating. The ultimate victory isn't military, it's generational, when people grow up defending the system that shaped them. Because if you install belief early enough, it doesn't need to be true, it just needs to be repeated confidently. Like a bad TED Talk, sponsored by someone who'd rather you don't ask follow-up questions. And if no one remembers what was erased, no one questions what remains. Influence doesn't knock on your door anymore. It gets invited in through the school gate. You won't find this war in the news. There are no missiles, no parades, no ceasefire. Just pens, pages, and silence. Because this war isn't fought on borders. It's fought in memories, and the casualties aren't bodies, they're truths that never got printed. A nation doesn't lose when it's invaded, it loses when its children defend someone else's version of the past. And in school after school, that loss plays out daily. In what's omitted, what's emphasized, what's never translated, what's never even taught. From refugee camps to capital cities, students recite worldviews they didn't choose, taught as facts, tested as truth, graded as obedience. And when that happens long enough, there's no need to suppress rebellion. You've already taught them how to say yes in 3 languages. Subscribe now, because the war for power isn't coming. It's already printed, distributed, and tested every semester. This was Empire Secrets. Your desire, your empire.